In this video, I will be showing you how to build the Sport Quad V3 frame kit that can be found on my website. To complete this kit, you will need square half-inch wooden dowels. These can be found at Home Depot or Lowe's or any home improvement or hardware store. When you're buying them, be sure to find the straight ones. As you can see, some of them are pretty curved, so just try and find the straightest ones you can. You will also need some sort of thin tubing. This is carbon. It's lighter and stronger, but these would also work. They're bamboo skewers. I would recommend going with carbon tubing. This one is 4 millimeters and it's hollow. So these will be used for the actual the bottoms of the landing gear. As far as tools, you'll need a 2.5 millimeter Allen key, a 5.5 millimeter socket wrench. If you really don't have one of these, you can get away with using pliers. You'll probably need, obviously, a knife, just because those are good to have. Glue, Gorilla Glue, here's super glue. You don't necessarily have to have those kinds, but you do. If you're going to mount the motors using this cotton thread, which you also need, you will probably need some sort of super glue that can soak into stuff like cotton thread really easily. So we're going to start off by cutting the arms and mounting them to the center plate. So for mounting, you can see there's 3 holes here and 3 holes here on every corner. Now you're going to be using these 2 center holes to actually mount the arms. The bolts are going to go through these and into the arms. These 2 holes on the side can be used to mount the arms using zip ties if you want to wrap them around. Or you could also use something like cotton string and tie it really tight. I guess you could mount the arms that way if you want something that'll break in a crash. But for now, we're going to be bolting through these 2 holes. Now, these side holes can be used to help align the arms on this plate, because these are exactly ½ inch apart and the arm is a ½ inch thick. So for mounting these, you're going to place the arm on this plate, and you can look at these side holes and see if they are touching the edges of the wood. Now, it should be exactly in the middle of those 2 holes. That's how you can know it's lined up right. Also, this back hole, this furthest back hole, this arm should be about 1 centimeter past that when you mark it. So just keep in mind, you want to give yourself about 1 centimeter more room on the wood to drill. So now we'll flip it over and put it all down here. Now here's a trick. To help align the wood correctly, you can put bolts in these side holes, and this will fit right around the wood and help you hold it in the center while you make your mark. So you're going to place this over the frame arm, and that'll just kind of help hold it in the center. Now, let me grab my pen. Now align the arm so that it's about 1 centimeter past that last hole, so the actual end of the arm comes back here and the hole's right here. You're going to make sure it's perfectly lined up, and then take a Sharpie or something and mark exactly where you're going to drill those holes. Right, like that. So now do that to all 4 of these arms. To find how long the arms actually need to be, lay the plate down and then put the arm about 1 centimeter back from that last hole. So just set it up how it's actually going to be on the helicopter. And then take your motor and lay it down on the arm so that the tip of the propeller lines up with the edge of the frame plate. You want that to be lined up. And then take your marker and mark just past the motor on the arm. And then you'll see that's how long you need your arm to be. And you can measure this. That is 10.5 inches. and these are 14-inch props. So if you're using smaller props, your frame arms will probably be smaller than that. But that was 10.5 inches. So now you need to cut 4 of these segments of wood. So here I have my 4 arms, and I drilled them. When you're drilling the holes in these arms, use a 3mm bit, and you have to be sure to drill like straight down. If you have a drill press, that'll be even better. I did these with a hand drill, but you just have to be sure you're going straight down so that the holes on the other side will be centered and not off. These I've already used, so they have washers stuck in them, but they're ready to be attached to the center plate. So to do that, you're going to take these black screws and stick them through the edge holes. So that's the hole closest to the corner, and then goes on a arm. So as you can see how that's set up. And now whenever you're bolting onto wood, put a washer in there. So it's one of those little bronze washers, and then put a bolt on the end of that. Don't do the inside holes yet. Just do the outside holes with the second hole on the arm. So I'll go ahead and do all 4 of these. Okay, that's done. As you can see, they have a really jiggly quadcopter now. So now we're going to take these stainless steels and put them through the center. So all these bolts are through. Now we're going to put on the power distribution board. Yours will probably look a little bit different than this. This is just an old one I had laying around. So this is going to obviously fit right through these screws. So this power distribution board is actually being used to stiffen this frame. Obviously this top plate is 1mm carbon, so it's not stiff enough to hold this quad rigid. So this center plate is a huge part in the actual frame structure to hold the whole thing stiff. These little holes are not a whole lot to hold the torque that's going to be pressing down on the center plate and up on the arms from the motors. As you can see, the area from the edge of the hole to the edge of the center plate is very thin. So we're going to use a little bit of glue to help hold that. So taking off my plate, and this requires a tiny amount of glue. It's just going to spread out. So I'll wait till this gets going and just put a little drop of, in this case, Gorilla Glue. I'm using Gorilla Glue versus the super glue because it'll give me a little more time to move things around before it hardens. So just a tiny bit of glue on each arm. And now you're going to take your frame center or power distribution board and put it on the quad. Now, see these square holes? These are going to be on the side. So this is front and back on the quad. So the power distribution boards have leads to attach like a central power cable that comes from your battery. So you're probably going to want that to be facing either the front or the back, because it doesn't really matter in this case. Either side can be the front or back. So I'll put that on, and now just put some nuts on these bolts. Now the reason you're using the stainless steels for the center and the black ones for the outside is because the stainless ones are a little bit longer and they're needing to go through the power distribution board and the top plate and the arms, and these ones only need to go through the center plate and the arms. So you need a little bit more length there. Okay, so all the nuts and bolts are in. Now grab your socket head wrench and tighten all these bolts. Now don't crank them down yet, but just snug them up pretty well. So now take your frame, and as you can see, there's some flex in it. Once that glue dries, there's not going to be any flex in it. So just kind of bend it until it's straight and even. Make sure it's flat. And then you can tighten these bolts more. Of course, don't just tighten them enough to just break through the power distribution board and smash the wood in, but definitely tighten them more than before. So if you really want to save weight, you can go back and grind off the tops of these bolts and save just a tiny bit, but I'm not going to do that for this example just because I'm not too concerned about weight for this quad. I mean, I am concerned about it, but this frame is already so light that that's okay. I don't need that light of a frame. So now you have your whole thing, and it should be pretty rigid. Once that glue dries, it'll be ultra rigid. And now we are going to build the landing gear assembly. So this is a completed landing gear leg assembly. You'll need to make 2 of these. This one uses bamboo skewers for shish kebabs. They're strong, but they're not like extremely strong. So I recommend using carbon. These will totally work though if you don't have access to or don't want to spend the money on carbon. So when you're deciding how long to build these legs, consider what gimbal you have. I'm using the T2D gimbal, and these legs are more than enough. They are 7.5 inches long. I would recommend for a T2D gimbal probably going to 6-inch legs because you have plenty of clearance. So as you can see, these ones have 2 holes. You're not going to need to drill two holes next to each other. You're only going to need to drill 1 hole here and 1 hole here. So now I'll show you how to decide where you're making those holes. This is the bracket that holds the landing gear. So place the wooden leg onto the bracket, and the bottom of this is a 1/2 inch. The bottom of the bracket is a 1/2 inch. So that should go on either sides of the leg. So now this top hole right here, you're not going to use, and you're also not going to use this hole, the second hole up on the bottom. So position, first of all, draw a center mark on this leg. So there's a little mark in the center. And now put the bracket on there, and you should be able to see that mark in the top hole. It should be dead center with the mark you drew, and the edge of the leg should come halfway in that hole. So align the bottom, and now draw a dot on the very bottom hole on the bracket and a dot in the bottom top hole on the bracket. So now you have 2 areas to drill through. And again, if you have a drill press, that's great, but if not, just be as precise as possible, especially with this one, it's important. Using a 3mm drill bit, you just want to go straight through. So do that to 2 of these. So now we're going to talk about these brackets and what you actually have to do to prepare these to fit in the little slits on the side of the quad. Now you see these fit in, and there will be 2 of these on each side, like that, to hold the leg. So once it's all put together, it should look like this. However, there's one slight problem. You're going to have to modify these tabs a little bit. So what you're going to have to do is take sandpaper or a Dremel rotary tool and just shave in a little bit on the sides to make these edges, like right here, right along here, here, and then of course the same on the back side. You're going to have to make those edges rounded to fit the rounded tabs on the frame. So as you can see, these are not perfectly square. Now I've already shapen these little tabs and these fit really nicely. They just pop together like that. And as you can see, the little holes come out the top, and then these will be used to secure these brackets into the frame. So you're gonna need to take a Dremel tool or a little piece of sandpaper and actually round off those tabs. Now, if you're using a Dremel tool, be very careful because they'll take off a lot of carbon really fast. I'm just using a Dremel wheel as sandpaper, but basically what you want to do is just sand the sides of these tabs and also get into that corner back in there, because that's the area that's going to especially need to be contour with that curve that the bit made in the center plate. So just kind of sand them. It helps a lot with the Dremel. I'm not using my Dremel just to show how people without one can do it. So here's one I already sanded. As you can see, I took off a little too much right there. I was using an actual Dremel and it kind of sunk in right there, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. The edges of these are rounded nicely and they will fit very easily into the frame plates here. Let me try and find, yeah. So there are the holes. And as you see, these just snap right in. So I'm going to be using these legs that I already have made as an example. So there's two holes here that I was just testing out different methods of attaching them. You're only going to need one of these, or you're only going to need two of these 4 holes on yours. So like I said before, the bolt should be on the lower holes of the 2 on the carbon plate. So once you've put that together, it should look like this. So here are my two landing gear bracket assemblies. Now I'm going to be showing you how to build this section, how to actually get this rod through the landing gear leg. Now with these shish kebab bamboo skewers, you really can't use any like string, for example, to tie from here up to a point on the leg to reinforce it. If you want to make them stronger, you can take like another skewer, for example, and connect it down here at the base and then connect it up here to create like a triangle bracket. If you're using carbon rods, they're usually stiff enough where you can mount them down here and then tie strings that's pulled tight from the tip of the leg up to the arm. And as you can see, they're pretty hard to bend. So you can pull that string tight and that will keep them a lot more sturdy, because this is just a glue joint right here, so it's not super strong. But I'll be showing you how to put this together now and create the notch out of this landing gear. To create the notch in the landing gear, put the down rod onto some sort of really hard surface like this bed post, and then put the knife about the same distance away from the edge as the diameter of the tubing you're using is. This is just a primitive way to do it. You can also use a saw to just cut through, but I just like to hammer the knife right through there, and then go back and just slice that open just like that. And now you can fit your little dowel right into that notch. Then you can put some hot glue in that notch, put the landing gear in there and spin it around, get that hot glue connected to everything, then just make sure it's even and let it dry. So next off, put the landing gears through the little tabs in the frame plate, like that. So now the quad is sturdy and standing up. However, these will fall out because they're not attached. So there's a couple ways you can attach these with these little tabs. The first method is using these little pointy ends from the shish kebab skewers that you can use for the landing gear. Or you can just use any sort of little wedge device, and you just stick these through the holes and it'll pull those tabs up by using like a little wedge type mechanism. So I'm just going to use 2 for each one. You can use 4 if you want. This is just one method. There are a couple methods for mounting these. Now mark like 4 millimeters on each sides of those. This is a pretty primitive method of doing this, but hey, it works. So cut off the extra space that won't be needed, and then put that back. So now you can go around and put a drop of CA on each one of those connections there just to lock it into place. I'll zoom in here so you can see. So that's how that method would work, but there's a lot of different methods. So I'll show a different one now. You could also stick a little zip tie through these holes and simply tighten that down, and that would also hold in the tabs. You just have to be sure not to tighten it enough that it bends these inward. The method that I'll actually be doing involves hot glue. So just press the leg up tight to the frame, and now just fill that little hole with hot glue and create like a bridge of hot glue that goes through the hole on the tab. And that will be enough to hold the leg in. And the good thing about this method is it's strong, but it's not really strong. So in a crash, it'll probably break that hot glue barrier before it breaks the carbon. So now it's dry. That's a good leg joint. So that's not going anywhere. Doesn't look quite super pretty just because there's hot glue everywhere, but that's okay. Now I'll do it for this side. I kind of rotate the tip of the glue gun around the leg just to make sure the glue smears all around it and locks it in place. So now we're going to be installing the center rod that will hold your battery on one side and your camera on the other. So here's a T2D gimbal. This is going to sit on one side while your battery goes on the other side of the rod to balance it out. So what you want to do is take another stick, or really anything, and put it on the frame in the middle. And just kind of temporarily mount your camera and gimbal and everything that'll go on the front on one side, and then your battery on the other. Now, your battery doesn't need the entire length of the stick to mount on. You can leave, let me see if I can slide this whole thing forward to show better. You can leave, when you mount your battery on the stick, like an inch on the battery to hang off. You don't need the entire battery to be covered by the stick. So you can leave like an inch. Now, bring it back. So what you want to do is hang your gimbal and camera on the front. Put your battery on the back. This is not what kind of battery I would recommend using. These Turnigy Nanotechs are terrible, in my humble opinion. So position the battery. By the way, you should be using a longer center stick for this. This one's already cut, so I kind of know how long it should be. But for example, this one right here is longer. If you're using a longer rod, then the same basic principles apply. So what you want to do is get your camera as far forward as possible. Not really as far forward as possible. You just want to get it enough, forward enough so that it clears the view of the props. So basically, put your battery on the back, put your camera on the front. In this case, my camera, the lens is a little bit past the front arms. I'll show that here. So the front arms are right here. My camera is just a little bit in front of that. That's how far out you want that to be. And then just balance, just find the center point of where this stick should balance at. So see, that balances right there. So now keep it in the same position relative to the frame. Pull out that fulcrum, and now that's where your center arm, I guess you could call it, could lay. So now keep it in the same place. Flip the whole thing over. Make sure that it's centered on the frame, and then draw a mark for where to drill your holes. Now on the actual center plate of the frame, you'll notice there's a bunch of holes. You can really use any one. I'm just using the ones that are furthest out, furthest towards the edge. So now drill your holes in the wood. These are already drilled though. Then you can place this center arm on there, and I'll have bolts laying right here. The bolts just go right through the wood and through the carbon, obviously, and then put some nuts on the bottom. Then tighten these down. This doesn't need to be extremely tight, and it's not going to be holding a lot of load, so that's why I'm not using washers on the top by the wood, but you can. I would recommend it. It's not the end of the world though if you don't. So that's that. This is basically the completed frame. So now I'll cover mounting the battery, the camera gimbal, and the motors. But I'm not going to go into mounting all the electronics because there's a lot of different ways to do that. So to mount the battery, I put Velcro on the long side of the battery, and then also put Velcro on the bottom of the square wooden tube. So like that. So now there's Velcro stuck on the bottom of there. Press it in nice and well, and then the battery just simply sticks right to that. Now, of course, that's not really strong, so what I also do is take one of these straps that can be bought at pretty much any hobby store and wrap it around the battery. And that's not going anywhere. So now for the gimbal, or just camera, whatever you're doing. So there's obviously a ton of gimbals out there and a ton of different ways to mount the camera out there. This is the T2D Tarot gimbal that holds the GoPro. Now, it's pretty easy to figure out how to mount any type of gimbal or any type of camera mount to the front of this pole. A lot of people are going to be using vibration dampeners, obviously, so mount that whatever way is possible. So to mount this gimbal, what I've done is put popsicle sticks across these little tube clamps, and then you can take a zip tie and just cinch this off to make it stronger. And then clip the excess. Now, these are just popsicle sticks. Of course, do the zip tie thing to all four. These are just popsicle sticks, and you might wonder, why would you be mounting a gimbal just with popsicle sticks? They're strong enough. They're definitely strong enough to hold the weight of it. And they're thin, so they might flex a little bit, and that's probably good because you could isolate some high frequency vibrations that way, potentially. So to actually attach the popsicle sticks to the wooden center rod, I just put 2 dabs of hot glue in the middle of those. And then hold that on there, make sure it's center, and let that dry. Now, just a hot glue joint holding the entire weight of the camera is probably not super ideal. So you can always take some zip ties and just cinch down on that connection. And then of course you can also do it to the front. And that's not going anywhere. Whoops. So as you can see, that is a solid camera mount with the battery in the back, all balanced out very well. Now we'll mount the motors. So the obvious method for mounting the motors would be to measure out the width of the mounting holes on the bottom and then drill 2 holes through the wood and then put bolts that go through and into the motor. Now, of course, that's a perfectly good way to do it, but that's not the way that I'm gonna be showing in this video. So if you are doing it that way, which I would recommend is a great way to do it, you can take these cross brackets that come with the motor. They're the normal stock motor mounts for most motors. I don't think they come with these RC Manchild motors in particular, but you can cut the edges off those and use this entire thing as kind of like a washer to keep the screws from sinking down into the wood. It just kind of stiffens the whole thing up. You could just use normal washers too, but this also works. So to show the second method, I'm going to be using this old burnt out motor from Hobby Queen. And you're going to need the mount I was talking about before to do this. So first of all, what we're going to do is put the motor, basically line it up to where you will probably want it. I'm just lining up the edge of the motor with the edge of this dowel. So right about there. This motor has a shaft, and we need to sink it all the way down to the wood. So we need to drill a hole for that shaft. So it's going to go by measuring it about right there. I'll drill a hole in this dead center for that shaft. That is the dullest drill bit I've ever used. So I'm just kind of cleaning up the top of that hole, making it nice and flat. Now we're actually going to mount it. So take the motor, put the shaft in the hole, make sure it's all lined up. So now you're going to need about 25 or 30 inches of string. This is cotton string actually. It's used for like cooking and stuff, I think, but it's really strong. You can also use nylon string, which would be even stronger. Might work better. I find that harder to work with because it's kind of slippery, so when you tie knots in it, the knots don't always stay. Speaking of knots, I'm having a hard time with this one. Anyways, so you tie a knot that looks like this. It's a little opening, and then put it on one arm of the mounting plate. So now this is the hard part. See how the string is right here and it wraps around? Now you're gonna pull it extremely tight up and over. Whoops, gotta redo that. So try and hold this motor mount kind of level. Pull it extremely tight up and over the edges of this motor mount and just keep going back and forth. keep pulling it as tight as you possibly can each time. Now do it probably 4 or 5 times, and then go back to the last one and just wrap it around while you keep pulling it tight. Whoops, it's still tight, I promise. Now instead of tying it off, you can just put some glue on that string, and it will soak in and harden and hold it really firmly. So once you flip it over, just make sure that the shaft isn't being held up by any string or wood. This shaft didn't penetrate all the way through the wood, so that's okay. As you can see, this motor is extremely strong. It flexes a little, but we're gonna fix that in a sec. As far as actually like lifting it up from the wood, it won't budge at all. So now we're going to strengthen this even more. Soak all the string in super glue, but be sure not to drip any into the bearings of the motor or anything like that. So just kind of put it all over the string. Also put it in contact in the spaces where that aluminum plus shaped bracket comes in contact with the wood. So that would be around this area, maybe a little in that hole, and just around that. So this mount is really strong. It's got a little bit of flex to it. Like normally the motor can move around a little bit on there. Of course the motor's not just going to fly off, but the motor can move around a little bit. But putting the super glue all over the string and in the connections between the aluminum mount and the wood, that's going to hold it really firmly into place. So this motor mounting technique is a good way that doesn't involve bolts. It's really light. It works well for these smaller motors. It's not extremely strong, but I can guarantee you once all this super glue dries, this is not going anywhere, and it's lighter than using bolts. So now for mounting the ESCs. These are RCMC 30 amp Simon K firmware ESCs. Simply plug them in to the motor. Like that. And wrap the whole thing down to the bottom of the to the bottom of the frame arm. So I like to put a little bead of glue on the bottom of the ESC. That's hot glue, by the way. And then just stick it onto the arm. Now ESCs get warm, so they would obviously melt the hot glue. You can take a zip tie and put it over. Don't pull it too tight because it'll break the ESC. Snip that off. And obviously you're going to solder. In this case I'm going to need to extend these wires a little bit. You solder the power wires onto the power distribution board. And then these signal wires are going to go up to your flight controller, wherever that might be. If you're using like a NASA or something like that, you can mount it to the top of this wooden arm here, or you can always put it in one of these corners. There's plenty of room for the receiver anywhere, really. That's really about all there is to this build. Putting on the rest of the electronics are pretty easy. As you can guess, you just do the same for this motor as you would to all 4 motors. Mounting all the other simple electronics, they can basically go anywhere, whatever works. Just make sure the center of gravity, right now I have a motor on this side and not on any other side, so center of gravity is way off, but just make sure everything balances out. And on the power distribution board, you can also solder on a JST to power the NASA power distributor. If you're using a NASA, and that can also power your FPV electronics if you're using FPV. So that's how you build the Sport Quad version 3 kit. Thanks for watching. Bye.